This is Dr. Emily Sherding with AR, and I'd like to say hello to all of our friends in Nebraska. My great-great-grandmother, Lena Ray Olmsted, was a homesteader in Nebraska. I grew up looking at the skin of this enormous rattlesnake that, according to family legend, she shot from her front porch. According to what I've learned, Lena Ray was one of the rare lone female homesteaders. She developed her own land and later married. She was motivated by the hope of Nebraska, and let me tell you, this state is a source of hope now. This state is one of the very few in the US projected to have increased potential for agricultural productivity. This forecast will give you information you need to get on top of the changes that are coming. Get ready to take advantage of the opportunities offered by the state of Nebraska. Let's check out the winter outlook first. It's not the biggest shift that we've seen. Here we go. We're over at the USDA plant hardiness zone map. You can see from the key here that most of Nebraska is currently in zone 5. We have a little bit of zone 4 shading up near the border there. As we look at shift projected under RCP 4.5, a moderately reduced emissions pathway as we approach mid-century, we can see some pretty good conservation. Most of the state is staying in a zone 5. We have some incursion of zone 6 from the south, particularly in your more populated areas here. So it's going to still be cold enough to snow, but it will be milder, and you may see less consistent snow cover than you've had in the past. In that projected zone 6 area, we expect that the winters will be more like the winters in, say, Kansas City today than in Nebraska as they are now. So they will be different, and you have an area not so far outside of this cultural zone that you can go to see and feel what those zone 6 winters will be like. In the summer, Nebraska is unfortunately looking at projections for a very serious heat up. Let's get over to the map for that. So over here, we're looking at the USDA heat zone map. You can see the key here shows the number of days over 86 degrees a year. Right now, from that sort of historical data, Nebraska is looking at about a maximum of 60 days over 86 in these mint colored belts, 90 days over 86 in much of the state. And in a few places near the border, you might expect as much as 4 months of a hot summer. And if we look at the projections for mid-century under RCP 4.5, we do see dramatic change. We see that area with 4 months of summer going far north, all the way up into South Dakota. And this is a situation where I want to zoom out and let you see the country as a whole. So here we're looking at our contemporary heat zone map, hot in the south, cool in the mountains, nothing surprising. Look at this tongue of heat as it extends up into the country of mid-century, far up there, all the way up into the Dakotas. And Nebraska is right in its path. So what that means is going to be a big change. It used to be you were expecting at most 60 to 90 days over 86 in the summer for this state. Now we're talking about a maximum of 120 for much of the state. That region of extreme warming is large, and it means a serious amount of stress on Nebraska's plant communities. If you're in an area that used to be in that light mint color, which sort of projected over the top half of the state interspersed, you are looking at a projected summer that is a literal doubling of potential hot summer days, twice the summer season. So you can imagine, of course, that on the opportunity end, that means an increase to your growing season. It will also mean an increase in your demand for electricity as more people want the air on for a substantially longer part of the year. So you're going to want to strengthen your grid. And with the extreme storms that are coming in, we're feeling now on the plains, you'll want to make sure that your electrical systems are not only storm resilient, but also localizable to make the damage easier to repair. I have found some great indications that Nebraska is working on exactly those problems, working hard to get ready for the future that is coming to take the most advantage of the opportunities for agricultural productivity. Let's drill down into the federal data to get you some nice information as to how much of a growing season increase we expect, and if that long summer also indicates a big increase in extreme heat. In the National Climate Assessment, Nebraska has been grouped into the Northern Great Plains region, and that's good news for you because the NCA has a lot more visual information for that region than the states that got put into the Midwestern region. Let's check out a visual that'll let us look at some more information on this change as we approach mid-century. So this is projected directly from the National Climate Assessment. We can see the region here, And we're looking at that lowered emissions scenario, RCP 4.5, instead of the RCP 8.5 scenario where we wouldn't reduce emissions at all. You can see here the change in the number of days above 90 degrees. For much of Nebraska under RCP 4.5, of that extended longer summer, we can see that only a maximum of about a month of those days is projected to be over 90 degrees. That's some nice news. You can see that when we're talking about heat, we're talking more about an increased duration than increased intensity, which is good. That's going to help you continue to maintain the agricultural productivity. And we can contrast that by looking at the higher scenario, where if we don't have any reduction in emissions, we're going to end up kind of closing the window on increased agricultural productivity because it's going to get too hot. If you're having multiple months above 90 degrees, that's going to be very poor productivity in the summer. That's going to be above the threshold for grain fill and for pod fill. If we look at the cooler days expected, we're going to get a clear idea of when the frost will change, how much longer the growing season will change. And we can see for much of Nebraska, and if you download the report, you can drill right down on this, that most of the state is looking at least a 2-week increase. Some places are looking at a 3-week increase in days above 28. We're losing days below 28, so we're gaining days above 28. That's a substantial increase to your growing season. And that is where you're going to get that big burst in potential increase in productivity, that precious hope that we find in the northern Great Plains. Nebraska can be a big part of the hope of the northern Great Plains, particularly on that 4.5 pathway, where we have a nice balance between increased growing season without the summer heat pushing productivity back down. Let's look to the bottom of the figure here and check out the precipitation patterns. So this lets us look at the number of days with precipitation exceeding an inch by mid-century. So those are the days where you have a deluge type rainfall that cause localized flooding that kind of overwhelm water systems. And we can see that if we manage to stay on the RCP 4.5 pathway, which is where we're heading now with current legislation and trends, that we would have a much lower number of those very wet days in Nebraska than if we don't manage to get emissions down to the 4.5 pathway. We can see that the trend for extreme precipitation is going to follow current precipitation trends in the state with a climate where it's drier in the west and wetter in the east. And if we zoom in here, we can see that there is a pretty good lineup, unfortunately, of those hot spots of deluge type rains with population centers. That does mean that there's going to be a need for thinking about controlling water, preventing runoff, and preventing flooding. There is an expectation in the federal projections that the variability in precipitation in this state is going to be a problem. So finding ways to get those heavy rains safely back into the ground, back into the aquifers, is going to be important because there will be more serious droughts as well as more of these serious deluges. Nebraska was an early state to make a statewide climate change assessment in 2014. If you want to check that out, we've got it right here. You can find the link in the description, and I want to share one of the pages with you as we're talking about precipitation. There's wonderful information that is detailed for the state. You can see here that winter and spring precipitation is expected to increase in the more northern states of this region, but there will be little change in precipitation for Nebraska. That's going to be a problem for the Dakotas. They're going to have so much increased late spring precipitation that it will interfere with planting, but Nebraska is going to be safe there. Projected changes in summer and fall precipitation are expected to be small across the region. There's some possibility of reduced summer precipitation in the Central Plains state. Again, the worst of that is going to skip Nebraska. So if we look at your highly local state level climate change report, we get more information that Nebraska is sort of skating into the edge of the best possible climate projections for 2050. And another note on the water outlook for the state, according to the feds in 2019, groundwater use is pretty sustainable across most of the state, and aquifer health is largely good. So you will have the water resources needed to deal with the increased duration in summer heat. If we pull all this information together, anyone who fears hunger in America, might want to take a deep breath and let it out, because here's the projected center of continuing staple crop production. Under the RCP 4.5 pathway, Nebraska will be so precious to the future of our food security. The climate is likely to permit conservation of the staple crops farmers here already know how to cultivate, already have the equipment, and it's projected that they will see increased yields. We are expecting significant yield drops to crop failure if we don't switch crops. In, say, the southeastern US, many states in the Midwest have been projected to see drops in yields that will set them back towards 1980s levels of production. And the Southwest is experiencing such severe drought that they are already needing to stop planting crops and rip orchards out of the ground. Nebraska, you are facing many challenges. Don't take this forecast too lightly. Although you are the hope of increased agricultural production, you are going to be dealing with things like increasingly extreme storms. They're wild. You know it as well as I do over in Iowa. The change in seasonality with that shorter, milder winter and that long duration summer, it's going to make life feel different by mid-century. The rivers will be different too. There's going to be a lot less water in your snowmelt fed rivers, potentially dramatically less water, which will change the landscape. It'll be hard and sad to see those changes to the natural riverside areas. Across the state, you'll need to tune up your utilities and work on managing water. But I know that these are challenges your state can handle. Many of us in the US fear food security in the face of the changes that are coming. Nebraska is a beacon of comfort and hope against that fear. There will be bad years when the weather hits just all wrong. But the good years under the RCP 4.5 pathway in Nebraska's future, those good years truly are projected to outweigh the bad years. This is Dr. Schoening with AR signing out. Please like and subscribe. Help get the message out there. There is hope. We can prepare for what's coming. Let's get ready.